Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host, and Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing very well, and of course, would like to follow up on Syria again.
Of course.
Now, we talked a lot about Syria yesterday, and been talking a lot about Syria, but the bombing occurred, I think it was Friday evening, 4 or 5 days ago now, and our position has obviously been, be careful, don't believe all the propaganda. Leading up to war, that certainly was the case that we experienced when they were leading up to the war in Iraq, based on lies, and we suspected it would be the same thing. And although we didn't have too much proof of much, we had very, very strong suspicion, and it looks like it's turning out to be the right suspicion, because the people who have finally gotten in there and looking around, and we had, of course, Vanessa yesterday, Bealey, and she had some on-site experience too, and she's right over there. And now, as the reporters are getting in there, which they hurried up and did the bombing before the reporters got in to find out the truth, that really made us suspicious. So here we are. We have American and British reporters going in there and talking about it, and a very, very well-known reporter, Robert Fisk, has come out, and boy, he has some interesting things to say, and nobody believes there was a real event. It isn't that somebody did it and it's a false flag and it was on purpose and somebody got gassed, and a lot of people, they can't even verify that there was a gas attack. It was all based on hyperbole and lying and excitement and hurry up, bomb them quickly. And then it's interesting, though, how it evolved, because when Trump was announcing that, I thought, oh, my Lord, he's going to blow up the world. But he purposely meant to not blow up the world. He didn't even want to kill anybody. Why bother? I'm glad he didn't go out to kill 1,000 people or 5,000 people, but he allowed it to be known where the bombs would be dropped. Now it's a bit of more sorting out that we have to do now, is how many bombs were dropped and how many times were they intercepted. There's some military questions that we have to ask, but I think there's pretty good evidence out there right now that the lying, it was all misleading, and there was not an attack.
Yeah, and you mentioned Robert Fisk. A few things are important about him. Fisk is very, very anti-Assad, so he's not an apologist going over there saying he's a wonderful guy, he would never do this, he's such a saint. He's always been very, very opposed to Assad. He calls him a horrible dictator. He thinks the regime is terrible. Nevertheless, he went into Duma, he talked to the doctors at the hospital, and he found out that the message that had been put out by the Syrian government is pretty accurate, that there was not a chemical attack. There were people that were suffocating after a building collapse and other things, and when they came in and were being treated, one of the white helmets came in yelling chemical attack. Everyone panicked and started hosing each other down. But the other thing, Dr. Paul, and I wanted to ask you about this because you know more than I do, but he said that the doctor said that the young people, the children were suffering from hypoxia.
Yeah, and some of those pictures were these kids that were dying from lack of oxygen. And I thought, well, why are they dying? Where's the oxygen? What happened? But the way he described this is it hasn't just when these bombs came, but because war has been going on for a long time. These kids have had to spend time in the tunnels, and this past week, maybe it was very intense, living in these tunnels, and there no ventilation, and they literally had dust and all, which would clog up the lungs, and the oxygen level would go low. So it's like starving them from oxygen. It's suffocation, and those pictures could go along with that. You know, they showed babies there dying and just lying there listless. That would come from severe hypoxia, because if you are denied oxygen, it'd be like you and I going up, climbing up the mountains. Some people live at 18,000 feet, but we'd start getting short of breath after 12,000 feet. But if we're suddenly up at 18,000 feet, we can't breathe, and that's why people have to take oxygen up here. And that's really what happened to them, and they were victims of an unnecessary war, to tell you the truth. And then don't let any emergency or crisis go to waste, so let's turn this around. because they were looking for another excuse to do this. So this fit the scenario, and I think it's great that Fisk finally found somebody that would give us the evidence, because the people who were really in charge there, they ran away from all this. They didn't. The white helmets weren't there to help. They were there to take care of themselves
and take pictures,
yeah,
and take video. But we do know a few things. We do know that the Jaish al-Islam, the Army of Islam, which is a radical Islamic group, was in control of Duma and of all eastern Ghouta. We know that they were in charge there. We know that they held about 3,000 prisoners that they had taken when they took over. And we do know, because we've seen the pictures in the video, that they forced them to dig these tunnels. They were living underground for extended periods of time. My guess is they weren't the best conditions down there. So that would explain a lot of the problem and probably a lot of the dead people.
Right. I think that's the explanation of the pictures that they were able to get, and I think that fell in their lap. It was an unintended or a consequence that they didn't deliberately create, but it fit their scenario. I mean, they were going to try and get away with the lie anyway, and because they've done this before. How many times have they used it? I think this is the third time.
They even admitted once that they used it against the Kurds.
Yeah, and this is, it's digging out the truth is the big thing, and I'm delighted that somebody's getting in here. It's just a shame that we're on the side of saying, hey, we don't want to know the truth. We need to, pursue our foreign policy before they find out the truth. And, when you look at, Theresa May and what our government does, and the anxiousness of the French wanting to participate and play this game, it's just as sickening as far as I'm concerned. But, instead of thinking about that policy all the time that we think about, sometimes they go off on tangents and sort of grasping at straws or trying to further deceive us. And just recently there were 2 senators plus some other senators. They've offered another resolution to give the president, authority to use military force, which has been used in the past. Some of our friends have supported that they use that as a vehicle for saying, yes, this is the use of your force. You have it for 3 months, and your purpose of you having this authority is to get out of the way, and you ought to quit after certain. That is not what this is. It was to acknowledge that there was use of military force, but the pretense here and the deception is that it wouldn't be against a government. It wouldn't be against the Saudi. It would be only against radicals, violent people, Al-Qaeda and ISIS and the Taliban. But I think you'd agree it would be difficult to sort all that out. Who are the radicals? I mean, why wouldn't they say, if they authorize a force against, when somebody come along and say, well, Assad's a radical, and on and on. It's an open door, and there was no end to it. It had to be, they had an opportunity to renew it after 4 years. Well, we shouldn't be there for another 4 years, and it'll be another 30-year war that we're working on that already in Afghanistan and all these areas. So it's a real tragedy.
It almost is going back to the Obama administration now. We're looking for allies on the ground. We're looking to continue the fight. But if we want to have a war against the radicals in Syria, well, A, we shouldn't have armed them, and this is an absolute established fact that they've gotten their hands on every piece of weaponry we've sent over there. We should stop arming them. And we should probably pull out immediately, because the Syrian government, with its legal allies, Russia and Iran, whatever we think about those 2 countries, it's a sovereign country that's chosen its allies. They have pretty much flushed out these radicals. They just flushed out eastern Ghouta, where Duma is. They're now working on a few places around Damascus. The only place where there's a significant one of 2 places there is a significant population of ISIS is actually right in the middle of the American-controlled territory in eastern Syria. So maybe if we want to fight the radicals, we should focus on the ones that are right in our backyard over there.
If somebody wanted a little project, they ought to take every announcement made by our government and our government officials, including Haley, leading up to this, especially the night of the announcement. It was over and over again of the same thing. And one of it dealt with our success, the U.S. success on what we have done to get rid of ISIS, but we might be needed because we don't want them to come back in again, so we have to stay. But it was a lie after lie about how great our forces operated by getting rid of ISIS. And here, if people in this country or any place in the world, if they say, you know, there is a limit, you know, Al-Qaeda, they're pretty violent, we have to get rid of them, they should be praising Assad.
Yeah.
You know, they were in there with our help trying to overthrow a so-called legitimate government, and it's a real tragedy on how many lies have been told about this.
And one of the other grasping at straws things we discussed when we were putting the show together is, you know, the U.S. says we got to prevent ISIS 2.0. That's why we got to stay there. But if you want to prevent ISIS 2.0, this other scheme that we were looking at this morning is the most harebrained scheme I thought of, that they must have ever thought of. They want to create a new Arab army to occupy that part of northeastern Syria so that we can leave. So they want the Egyptians, the Saudis, UAE, and Qatar to occupy that area. But they're the ones that sponsored ISIS 1.0. So why would you have them in charge?
And of course, we have 30% of Syria, and we have the oil part, a very valuable part of Syria. And then we're going to ask the Arabs to go up, and Trump always said, we're going to make them pay. It's not even a mercenary army. You know, we're telling them or trying to talk them into it, and they're going to go up and spend life and limb. You know, I don't think that the Saudi soldiers likely to go in there and maintain order up there. You know, it seems like they don't even know what they're thinking about, and yet this so-called army is going to go up there and restore order, and we're going to leave. Well, the odds of that happening, I think, is less than 1/10 of 1%, you know, that is going to happen. The only time, unfortunately, my opinion is rather pessimistic on this, we're going to leave when we flat out go broke, you know, because we're doing so much good in the world. It's our obligation to go. But you know what? I think that attitude, I'm cynical about that, but I think the attitude with the American people, at least a lot of the things we read on the internet are saying, why are we doing this, you know? And yet the propagandists are out there, and there is no good reason for that. And some people do I think the sympathy argument is the strongest. Babies are being gassed by this monster, and they buy into this. But those are the lies that were told, you know, Saddam Hussein. And everybody knows, even Trump, and it was wasted time, wasted money based on lies. And then we move over, we'll forget about that now, even though we're still fighting those wars. We move over and we go through the same process. But, you know, the biggest obstacle is the incessant lying and the perpetuation of the lies on the media. It's over and over again. But in this last week, there were a couple leaks in there, you know, where people on a decent station would come up and take a different position. Yeah,
the One American News Network, they were on the ground there. They came to the same conclusions. They talked to dozens of people.
Right. And,
in Duma,
So that is encouraging. So we'll keep plugging away to come up with some common sense.
Well, I think, you know, it's amazing to see this huge chasm, I think, that's erupted between the mainstream media, between those pushing the government narrative and those of us that are taking a skeptical view, because in light of what they said about Saddam, in light of all the war lies, in light of all the false flags getting us into war, we take a skeptical approach. And you and I have both watched our numbers explode over the past week or so. People do not believe the mainstream media. They do flock to us, and they do look to alternative sources, and I think that is very encouraging.
Well, it's also encouraging to me personally that the credibility is building. You know, I was involved many years ago with the idea that I'm going to be able to talk to 3 or 4 people and go to a college campus, and I got 15 people out. And I would just, you know, talk and try to get the message out, not expecting a whole lot. But now people are coming to us, and they're looking for us. But what I like, not only some viewers coming and looking for it, but when we get people on the air, like Vanessa and our ambassador that's coming, Ford is coming on, and they're quite willing and excited about coming on. So I think this is very good, and I don't think we even know. I always assume, well, why should I go and talk to 15 people? I said, well, maybe 10 of them will talk to 5 people. So you have no idea how many people you might influence, and that's the way it should be. So I think it's very encouraging that if you offer something out there, that people will come and listen. And as times get rougher, which they will, I think we'll be looking for an explanation on what's happening in our economy and what's happening in the military and all these operations, because this all is tied together. It's the fact that our government is out of control, and we have an international, we're running an empire overseas, and we're in charge of the world because we have the reserve currency of the world, and our economy is so-called booming. It's all based on fake money. So that's all coming to an end. So I'd like to see a point where we can get that kind of information out to a lot more people.
And our struggle against the mainstream media and the fake news is an ongoing struggle. And in fact, today is an anniversary, Dr. Paul, and I would like to bring it up to our viewers, because this has been 5 years to the day since we started the Ron Paul Institute. We were at the the Capitol Hill Club in Washington, D.C. We had a little reception. We had Dennis Kucinich, we had Jimmy Duncan, we had Walter Jones, we had, a group of Thomas Massey, I think, crashed the party. Yeah. And this is when we launched it, and this is what we started doing, and it's been now 5 years. It seems like we've been fighting an uphill battle that year, but I think since then, but I think our numbers have increased so much over the years, and our influence has increased. And I also want to thank all of our supporters, all the people that have been with us from the beginning, a lot of people recently that have come on board to support us, to make tax-deductible donations, to keep this show alive, to keep what we do at the Ron Paul Institute alive. I would like to ask you to please continue to support us. Please, if you can, make a donation, support the Ron Paul Institute, celebrate our 5-year anniversary by helping us continue to grow and expand for another 5 years. I do, Dr. Paul, think we're making progress. I think our numbers are increasing. With your help, with your continued support, we'll keep going.
Very good, Daniel, for bringing that up, and it is exciting that we lasted 5 years, and we're going to continue. But the one thing he did not tell you, that he's sort of a modest person. There would be no institute without Daniel, because my name's on there, and I argued against it. You don't need my name on there. We want to have an Institute for Peace and Prosperity. But he said, no, we'll do this because we want to continue your foreign policy that you talked about, while you were in Congress. But Daniel came to me with this idea, and I argued all the reasons why, no. So I was sort of reluctant. But he pushed and put it together. He even was so dedicated to this idea that he really wanted to work. He actually moved to Texas over this whole issue. So he became a Texan. So that's when I knew he was very serious about this. And so I am very pleased. I think Daniel deserves a lot of credit for this, and we're going to continue that, and of course that's why we're going to continue to have our conferences too, and we're planning one in August, so hope to see everybody in person. But I do want to thank everybody today for tuning in to our program, and I want to urge you to come back to the Liberty Report soon. Thank you.